parents and youth identifying as transgender to work through the unique challenges these families face. We encourage all teachers, parents, classmates, and youth volunteers to be on the watch for any instances of bullying, of youth.
Oh, okay, I found one. This video. Yeah, so yeah, here's an instance of bullying right now. Don't know, Danielle Smith, she's a Premiere of Alberta. She's basically Canada's answer to Marjorie Taylor Greene. And what if Marjorie Taylor Greene became governor? Well, that's Danielle Smith, and she's been elected, and she has a new 9-minute video about kids, protecting kids specifically. And wouldn't you know it, the American style, anti-LGBTQ+, trans people are bad war is now being propagated on a very large stage.
My fellow Albertans, today I wish to address a very sensitive issue involving our children and gender identity. This is not always an easy conversation to have. I strongly believe that we as a society must support and reach out with kindness and inclusion to those who
always, you know, it's calling card a fascist just to start out with, like, by the way, don't worry, it's in your best interests. Yes, and we're doing kindness right now.
Who identify as transgender and work to eliminate the discrimination they often experience in their lives.
But
as Premier of this province, I want every Albertan that identifies as transgender to know I care deeply about you and I accept you as you are.
Oh, I accept you. That's nice. That's nice, right? Good, nice music, well produced, you know?
As long as I lead this province, I will ensure you are supported and your rights are protected.
Oh.
In the case of children aged 17 and under who identify as transgender.
Oh, okay. So it's like, hey, by the way, trans people, I love you deeply. Oh yeah, like we go deep, all right? Trust me. I'm a good cis ally right here. For the adults. Okay? Just for the adults. For everyone else, here we go.
Sure. I also want you to know that you are loved and supported as you work through your often changing emotions, feelings, and beliefs. As we all know, children and teenagers are in a constant state of biological, social, emotional, and sexual development and change. They're constantly learning about themselves, trying new things, dealing with biological changes, and trying to understand a wide range of new thoughts and feelings. It's a very complicated time. In my view, one of the greatest responsibilities we as parents, teachers, and community leaders have is to preserve for our children the right to grow and develop into mature adults so that they are better prepared to make.
This is the most Canadian form of repackaged bigotry like I've ever seen. Just the posturing going on, you know? Like, I want it to be well produced, all right? We have to have really nice music, some kind of corporate jingle style stuff, yeah. And then why don't I start by saying, I love you. We'll open with that. Yeah, I'll just talk about how much I love them, you know? Trans people, I love you deeply. Now I want to talk about how basically if you're under 17 and you happen to be trans, you have no idea who you are or what you're going through. And it's a complicated time. You have to understand, it's a very complicated time.
The most impactful decisions affecting their lives. Decisions like choosing a career.
By the way, that was all like fucking, that was all story blocks, you know, copyright clear stock footage in the background.
Partner, raising children, their interaction with legal drugs like alcohol and cannabis, their sexual activities and preferences, and many other adult choices. It is my view that list of adult choices includes deciding whether or not to alter one's biological sex.
It took a while. I mean, it was what? This is like almost, it's a minute and 35 seconds into the 7-minute video before we got there. And now it's just basically like, okay, so the first part's done. I just want to let trans people know I love you, I care about you, and I respect you. And here we go. I don't think children should have the power to change their biological sex. How dare you? I will put some stock footage on the screen of a teenager looking sad.
Making permanent.
Look what could potentially happen if I didn't do what I'm doing right now.
And irreversible decisions regarding one's biological sex while still a youth can severely limit that child's choices in the future. Prematurely encouraging or enabling children to alter their very biology or natural growth.
What are you talking about right now? You keep saying like change their biological sex. Like what are we talking about? Are we talking hormones, chromosomes? Are we going to alter children's DNA? Is that what we're talking about? Are we talking about genitals? Are we talking about surgeries? Are we talking like it's a very, very broad set of things you're saying here. Kids should not be allowed to alter their biological sex. And unfortunately, that's what's happening. Also, children should not be encouraged to alter their biological sex by teachers, professors, YouTubers, TikTokers, Twitch streamers, and people who do that, well, I mean, they're criminals.
No matter how well-intentioned and sincere, poses a risk to that child's future that I, as Premier, am not comfortable with permitting in our province.
Aww.
Similarly, the risks and unfair advantages that young women and girls are experiencing when competing with biologically stronger transgender females in sporting.
Wow. So you're not basically going as far as saying that trans women aren't women and that they shouldn't be able to participate in activities or women's spaces. What you're saying is that trans women specifically have just more biological advantage. So because of that, they should not be allowed to participate. Again, very Canadian, you know, just a little condescending, paternalistic, just as oppressive. It's the same levels of oppression, but it's being done with a very nice little bow at the very end of it all. Nice music, soothing, just so you all know.
Competitions have also grown too high. After much discussion, the government caucus and I have therefore decided to implement the following policies and guidelines as it relates to transgender minors and athletes, including additional supports to assist.
This is, again, the way Republicans, right-wingers, conservatives, fash, far-right, all of them, they always do this little game. It's a dance, if you will, where it's like, hey, by the way, we're going to oppress you while simultaneously saying that we need to restrict the way in which you may be able to fight back against that kind of oppression. So, for example, if you happen to be someone who's under 17 and you happen to be trans and you happen to want to be getting medical attention, you know, gender-affirming care, and it's been approved, again, by every major medical association in Canada for you to receive that gender-affirming care, therefore, for us to restrict that from you would simply be denying you health care. So this is basically a call to deny one group of people health care, specifically because they happen to be trans. So now we're going to oppress a minority. In doing so, children who receive gender-affirming care, who receive things like hormone replacement therapy, may not have a lot of the issues that she's concerned about, as in, well, if you grow up as a biological male, you will have a, an unfair sports advantage. If you grow up as a biological female, then you will be less talented, so therefore you should not have to compete. Again, like all that shit, it may not even apply as much if you let people transition when doctors are stating they should be allowed to do so. Again, this is something that should be done between a doctor and the patient. You know, this is something that shouldn't have Daniel Smith in the room. Daniel Smith should not be a part of the conversation. She should not be using government overreach or state power to try and restrict the medical attention of people. But that's what's happening. It just sounds better when it's worded this way, though. It sounds so nice, right? It's just like, oh, well, I love trans people. I care deeply about trans people. But I also think that, you know, being a kid, it's complicated. We go through a lot of changes, and I just don't want anyone to make any decisions that they could regret later in life. So I'm going to force you to be a gender that you're not. That's what it is. I mean, just brass tacks, plain facts, that's what this is. She is saying she wants to use state power to force you to have to be a gender that you are not. And you're not allowed to get medical intervention or medical help or anything about that. She's going to force you. Now imagine if that was being done to cis people. Again, that's like the I want to get in some people's brains in terms of understanding this. If you were to flip the whole thing, like for myself, I'm a cis guy and I like being a man. I do not want to be a woman. I do not identify as a woman. So it would not make sense for me to be forced against my will to have to become a woman. It would be really fucked up if all of a sudden they were like, oh yes, you now forcibly have to undergo surgeries, Lance. You now forcibly have to take HRT. You now forcibly have to do a whole bunch of things. You have to do this because we want to force you to become the gender that you're not. And I'm like, well, that seems like a violation of my human rights. Yeah. Because it is. It absolutely is a violation of your human rights. For sure it is.
This transgender adults to secure the healthcare they need and the counseling support for youth identifying as transgender to ensure they can successfully work their way through their complex feelings and emotions as they grow to adulthood. First, on the issue of
AKA, you won't have healthcare in this regard until you turn 18. Before then, we're going to say that you don't have access to healthcare.
Gender reassignment treatments for minors. For minors age 17 and under, top and bottom gender reassignment surgeries will not be permitted. For children age 15 and under, puberty blockers and hormone therapies for the purpose of gender reassignment or affirmation will also not be permitted, with the exception of those who've already commenced their treatment at this time.
So does this apply to cis folk? when cis people go through precocious puberty, for example. And yeah, it's been done for a very long time, giving puberty blockers to cis children who are experiencing that. Does that apply to them too?
Minors aged 16 and 17 will be permitted to commence hormone therapies for gender reassignment and affirmation purposes, so long as they are deemed mature enough to make these decisions and have parental, physician, and psychologist approval.
It's just like, it's so fucked up. It's all being done with this, tranquil little music in the background where you're like, we're basically going to decide on your behalf what form of healthcare you're allowed to have and decide. Yeah, we're going to make that choice for you. If we deem that you are an acceptable candidate. Yeah. A lot of the guidelines we're putting forth, again, are in direct opposition to the consensus of the entire medical community. But we're going to go there. Why not?
For transgender adults, our government is currently working to attract one or more medical professionals to practice in Alberta who specialize in transgender surgery to ensure those individuals transitioning have access to an expert in Alberta to assist them with their extreme.
And then afterwards to do this kind of like bait and switch where it's like, oh, and by the way, again, I love trans people, care deeply about trans people. I want to let you know that for trans adults, you are going to have access to gender affirming care. Yes. Yeah. So trans adults, don't be scared. Again, this is just the preliminary steps for us as we're exploring our options here.
Extremely unique and complex medical needs, rather than going to Quebec, which is now the practice. We will also be building a private registry of medical professionals who specialize in this field to better support the lifelong healthcare needs of transgender Albertans, including access to needed hormones and surgery aftercare. When it comes to classroom instruction on subject matter involving gender identity, sexual orientation, or human sexuality, we will be requiring parental notification and an opt-in requirement for each instance a teacher intends to give formal instruction on these subjects. Furthermore, all
Gonna be great for teachers. Yeah. Hi, teacher. Yeah, I don't feel safe at home and it's really scary to me. Oh, hold that thought. Just hold on. All right. I'm going to have to apply for this. I'll see whether or not the application goes through. And if it does, we can have a conversation. But I have to opt in now because, yeah, this discussion could relate to your gender identity. And if you are trying to talk to me about your gender identity, well, that requires me to opt in. So.
Third-party resource materials or presentations related to gender identity, sexual orientation, or human sexuality in our K through 12 school system will need to be pre-approved by the Ministry of Education to ensure the materials are age-appropriate. For a minor,
by the way, this is a lot of the Ron DeSantis style stuff. Just now it's being done in Canada. But you can just see how the packaging is so much more different in this country. Like Ron DeSantis would not need this lovely music in the background unless it was made by one of his fascist editors who wants to have like the rising sun on screen or something. But otherwise he wouldn't want to have this, or well, maybe he would want some pretty hard EDM if it was like one of his gay ads or something like that. But anyways, he wouldn't want all this shit. Right? Like he wouldn't want it to look all nice and friendly, and he wouldn't want to start by saying like, oh, I love you, trans people, because like, yeah, that's not part of the messaging. So yeah, it's a lot more crude. It's a lot more crass when it comes out of the mouths of a Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis or Tucker Carlson, etc. But it's the same purpose. Right now it's just being done with a very almost twisted and sick, condescending, paternalistic kind of like veneer of just like, don't worry, this is in your best interest that you shouldn't have access to healthcare anymore. Yes. Because of the way you were born. Yeah, I know. It's a violation of your human rights, but I don't think you should have access to healthcare anymore because I don't understand it. And it's weird to me. And so I think I should have authority, state power to prevent you from having access to healthcare because I don't understand it.
Age 15 and under, the government will require parental notification and
Stop resisting our love energy all day. Yeah, exactly.
And consent for a school to alter the name or pronouns of a child. For 16 and 17-year-olds who choose to alter their name or pronouns, parents do not need to give consent.
So you can choose your own pronouns when you're 17. Enjoy being misgendered for 17 fucking years of your life, you know? Oh, there's nothing we can do. I'm sorry. I have no authority to stop misgendering you. Even as your teacher, I have to keep misgendering you, or they can fucking write me up. They'll write me up to the parents.
But they must be notified. We know that nearly all parents, even those who may disagree with the decision of their children, will love and care for their children no matter what choices they make. However, in the handful of rare situations where one or both of the parents reject or become abusive to a child who identifies as transgender, we have child protection laws that will be strictly enforced.
But those officers will still continuously need to misgender them if they're not 16 years old. Like if a 15-year-old is physically abused by their parents and wants to leave their household and they're like, I use they, them pronouns, they're still going to be like, well, unfortunately, on the document, biological female, so she, her, sorry, I know. In the midst of all this, it seems pretty fucked up, but it's the law. Gotta keep misgendering you here.
The government is also designing a pilot project to provide appropriate counseling services to support parents and youth identifying as transgender to work through the unique challenges these families face. We encourage all teachers, parents, classmates, and youth volunteers to be on the watch for any instances of bullying of youth.
Oh, okay, I found one. This video. Yeah, so yeah, here's an instance of bullying right now where you're being very condescending and at the same time basically stating that you're going to violate people's human rights by giving certain people less access to healthcare. That's fucked up. I would say that's a form of bullying. Pretty high one, in fact.
With the emerging issue of the unfair disadvantages that young women and girls are experiencing when competing with biologically stronger transgender female athletes.
Has a trans woman won Olympic gold? Has that happened yet? Do we have Olympic gold won by a trans woman where unfortunately all the other cis women who were competing were unable to compete against the trans woman who won? I mean, even if that example existed, right? Because there is a non-binary person who won in soccer. I think that's the closest, is their victory, getting a gold medal in a soccer game, but they identify as non-binary. They don't identify as a trans woman. Even if that was the case, why is it only a problem when trans women win? That's like at the crux of this whole thing, right? It's like, even if a trans woman did win in a sport, but that was the purpose of competing in that sport.
In sporting competitions. I strongly believe that those who were born male but have transitioned to or identify as female are owed the opportunity to meaningfully participate in.
You know, that was worded. Those who are born male but have transitioned to or identify. You know, if you've made the choice, okay, I'm not going to disrespect your choice. I mean, I'm just going to say you can still, I guess, make that choice, right? Like if you decide all of a sudden that you want to be, you know, something else, fine, I'll respect it to a degree, but like.
Sport. However, there are obvious biological realities that give transgender female athletes a massive competitive advantage over women and girls. It is not beneficial for those women, including those who are transgender, for this divisive and sometimes dangerous situation to continue. That is why the Alberta government will work.
John, protest at Alberta Legislature February 4th, 2 to 4 p.m. If you are in Alberta, there's a protest of this disgusting vile filth apparently taking place at the Alberta Legislature February 4th, 2 to 4 p.m.
Work with sporting organizations active in our province to ensure that women and girls have the choice to compete in a women's only division in athletic competitions and are not forced to compete against biologically stronger transgender female athletes. We will also work with those same sporting organizations to ensure transgender athletes are able to meaningfully participate in the sport of their choice through the expansion of co-ed or other gender-neutral divisions for athletic competitions. I understand how controversial and divisive discussions on topics of sexuality and gender can be, especially when those conversations involve children. I would therefore ask that as we work through implementing these policies, that we, as adults in this province, do all we can to
You want to depoliticize people's existence. I'm sorry, but you don't get it. Like, people who you are targeting, minorities whose lives you're trying to make worse, they don't just get to stop being that thing. They don't get to depoliticize themselves. Their very existence is now part of the reason why they might not have access to healthcare, just by virtue of existing, just by virtue of being born. Really hard to depoliticize yourself. Depoliticize yourself. Come on, why don't you do it?
Depoliticize the discussion and focus on the well-being of the children involved, whether they are young people identifying as transgender or who find themselves attracted to those of the same sex or simply trying to understand.
I understand this can be complex, and I'm basically saying out loud right now that I want to take away the healthcare of a group of people simply for existing. But don't politicize this, okay? Doesn't matter If you're gay, it doesn't matter if you're a bear, it doesn't matter if you're a well-hung twink, or maybe you just enjoy being an otter now and then. None of that is important, okay? You can still exist. I'm not saying you can't exist, but just don't be so loud about this. Don't get so angry. Why is this always such a contentious topic? I just want to marginalize people in peace and quiet, all right? Just leave me alone. Just want to take away your rights. And quiet.
The complex and often changing emotions and feelings of being teenagers, they all need our unconditional love and support. And it's to those children and teens that I want to say just how much we love you and support you in becoming the person you want to be.
This is so gross. Oh man, it's so much worse in a lot of ways than when you hear the right-winger pundits that aren't like fucking Canadian putting on the song and dance. Like, Marjorie Taylor Greene would never make this video. I know I said this is Canada's answer to Marjorie Taylor Greene. In beliefs, yes. Not in presentation, but in beliefs, yeah. She is into batshit conspiracy theories. She believes in anti-vax shit. She wants to separate Alberta from the country. She's incredibly racist towards Indigenous people. She believes in like pseudo-history, history revisionism, a lot of fucked up shit, yeah. But the package that you're getting it all in is not going to be like someone who's just like, yeah, we have to get rid of all the trans people. We have to eliminate trans people from existing because they are depraved. You know, you don't get that. Fair enough. But this is somehow worse because that's what this is in essence, right? But it's just the whole thing's got this entire like overly produced veneer about it. It's just like it's so much more is sick.
You never have to feel alone or isolated. If you do, reach out to your parents, family members, teachers, a coach, or other trusted adults and ask for support.
It's like someone holding a boot to your face while you're on the pavement and saying, I love you. But I love you. I fucking love you. That's what this feels like.
We, as the adults in your life, will be there for you to make sure you know just how amazing and precious you are.
But we are going to be taking away your health care. Egal Canada. Egal and skippingstone.ca have come together to jointly condemn in the strongest possible terms the policy measures announced by Premier Smith this afternoon. Egal stands for Egalité, and Skipping Stone will bring legal action to protect our communities. Fucking awesome. Good on you. Egal Canada and Skipping Stone Foundation condemn Alberta's attack on 2S LGBTQI people and promise legal action. Egal Canada and Skipping Stone Foundation come together to jointly condemn in the strongest possible terms the policy measures announced by Premier Smith this afternoon in a directed unprecedented attack on 2S LGBTQI plus Canadians, trans and gender exclusive youth in particular. The draconian measures announced run directly counter to expert guidance and evidence, violate the constitutional rights of two-spirit LGBTQIA plus people, and will lead to an irreparable harm and suffering. Eagle and Skipping Stone will bring legal action to protect our communities. The government of Alberta is playing politics with some of the most vulnerable members of society. And that is true. That is true. This is directly going to make trans people and trans kids, especially, lives scarier and harder, which can lead to much higher levels of unaliving themselves, which of course is horrifying, and it's being done by cis people. Cis people are the problem here. It's not trans people for existing, it's cis people for bullying them. That's the problem. Like the fucking premier of an entire province. Trans and gender diverse youth, attacking them for cheap political points. We will not stand for it. Representatives from Egal Canada are available for further comment on this matter. To schedule an interview, please email. Oh, maybe I'll follow up with that. Danielle Smith knew that this was going to make kids more vulnerable to abuse. She said so not long ago, but she did it anyway. So here's some receipts. Wildrose leader Danielle Smith makes passionate plea legislator for gay-straight alliances. Wildrose leader Danielle Smith stands in the legislature Tuesday and talks about meeting kids at gay-straight alliances, groups, and schools, also known as GSAs. For years, Smith thinks about a voice on the phone. A mother calls about a trans son who wants a GSA in school and Carlson and told no. For years, Smith wonders what happens to the kids shut down by the adults at the school. She also thinks of those other students at the GSAs. Most of the parents didn't know they were out there yet. Most of them didn't know if their parents knew there would be some consequences. One individual I spoke with said that 2 lesbian girls had come out of their school but again kicked out of the school. Another young boy told me that he came out to his parents and his dad rejected him. Silence. A long space with no words. Smith has a hard time getting out the next sentence. Another young woman was beaten by her father. By the way, GSA groups and schools provide safety and support for LGBTQ plus students. In some of these cases, mature youth, this is really a case of life or death for some of them, continues Smith to her fellow politicians. We really do have a number of youth who have nowhere to go if they're not accepted by their community and not accepted in their home environment. Smith says some kids have cut themselves. Some have tried to unalive themselves. Sometimes they succeed and die. This shows you the level of depravity fucking going on here. Like just the absolute fucking perverse sickness of someone who knows better. Someone who has had experience apparently apparently, communicating directly with family members in regards to their LGBTQ plus kids, and still is doing this shit. In spite of, like, you can't say like, oh, well, maybe she doesn't know about the statistics that actually every single like major study on this has shown that it's actually societal stigma that contributes to the high levels of suicidal ideation. Like that's societal stigma. It's not just the very virtue of existing that does it. And so if we lower societal stigma, it has dramatic effects which we can observe amongst people who are LGBTQ plus and their livelihood, especially amongst children. She knows.
Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Can you please hit the like and subscribe button and maybe leave a comment? It really does help the videos out. But first, the people who produce everything you see before you and make this entire channel possible: Amazing Fletch, Anna Loves Riley, Ariane McCarthy, Cheryl Alvarez, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hagbard Celine, Multimondi, Omni, Peanut Butter Blondie, Political Puppy, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Ruby K, Cernicus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian DeMel, Trevbot.exe, Words Greenwood, and Travis McClinton. And also, thank you to every other person who helps fund this show. Their names are on the screen right now. It would not be possible without every single one of them. We cannot thank you enough. And if you want to join the Patreon, please come to patreon.com/theserfs and help us exist.